Welcome to the Polymer Science Podcast. I am Dr. Alicia Buertes.
And I'm Jacob Shackman.
In this podcast, we'll be speaking to researchers from around the world and talk to them about how their work is improving our daily lives. I hope you enjoy our conversation and that you learn something new. Hello everyone, today we are talking to Tshepo Mangoele. He is a chemical engineer from South Africa, but he has also created an amazing company called LignOrganic. He was the previous owner of Eco-Invader Solutions, which is a biotechnological company in Johannesburg. This company focused on helping to deal with plastic pollution by inventing bioplastics developed from sawdust and using nanotechnology. Tshepo has then continued to create this LignOrganic company. His company was established in 2017 and is Africa's first sulphur-free lignin producer. The company focuses on more sustainable resources and is focused around the development of environmentally friendly solutions for a wide variety of markets, such as cosmetics and skincare, packaging, rubber manufacturing, agriculture and animal nutrition, as well as biomaterials. Mangoele was shortlisted for 2021 Africa Prize for Engineering Innovation for his bioplastics. He's adamant to grow his company so that it can make a difference in the world and make sustainable and environmentally conscious products the new normal. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please let us know what you thought about this episode. You can send any comments or questions to polymersciencepodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to like and subscribe, and then we'll see you in the next one. Welcome, Tshepo Mangoele. I'm so glad to have you on the Polymer Science Podcast. Thank you for giving me your time and talking to me about your company. So firstly, there are a few things I need to mention first. That you are the founder and CEO at LignOrganic, which is a company founded in 2017, correct?
Yes.
So it's really fascinating. You are working with lignin. You're the only lignin producer in Africa that is sulphur-free. And your company focuses on a lot of sustainable resources, and it focuses on developing environmental friendly solutions for many products like cosmetics, skincare, packaging, rubber manufacturing, and biomaterials of all sorts, especially in the agricultural and animal nutritional application as well. So I've got a lot of questions for you about that. Firstly, some are technical, more polymer orientated, and some are just about your life and how on earth you are managing all of this. So just to jump right in, can we first just talk about your company itself? What was it like to start your own business, and how long did it take for the vision to become a reality?
No, thank you very much, Alicia, for having me. Honestly speaking, most people don't tell you about business before you start that. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's always like you see the glitz and the glam of business, but you don't really get to understand how difficult it is. So I got to realize that when I was starting, but it was really rewarding. I mean, just to give a brief background on how it all began, I was actually sort of doing my third year in chemical engineering at WITS. And I was at a point where I was sort of trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. I really was at like a point where I was trying to decide whether do I pursue the arts or do I continue with this chemical engineering. And I remember one morning at 3 a.m. I was just writing a poem about this thing, trying to figure it all out. And from that, I just realized that through the arts, I wouldn't be able to have the impact I would like to have in the world. So I think then at that point, I decided to completely stop doing the arts. I was doing mostly poetry at the time, and just solely focus on the chemical engineering, but also focus on chemical engineering in practice. So that's when I started. That's when I started the company. But in the beginning, the point was to try and use alien plants and sort of beneficiate them to other different products. Because I had an interaction with Jersey City Parks and Zoo, so they control like the parks and the zoos in Joburg, and they were having a big problem with these alien plants. And I then sort of tried to think around ways to use these alien plants, and that's how the company started. The name of the company was actually Eco-Invader Solutions, because we wanted to use like invader plants to create eco-friendly solutions.
Okay.
And that's how it started. I mean, in 2017.
Wow, that's awesome. So your company at LignOrganic focuses on 4 types of products: lignin, hemicellulose, soap, and bioplastics. How did you progress into those fields? And can you explain to the listeners and to me a little bit more about the products itself? So what is it, and how was it produced, and why are you making these products specifically?
Yes. So in the beginning, like I said, I wanted to use alien plants to create different products. So the progression of these products started with trying to make fiber packaging. So in the beginning, what I would do is try and extract just the cellulose from these alien plants. So I was mainly using lantana camara and just literally in the kitchen trying to cook these fibers to create these sort of fiber-based packaging. So that's how it sort of started in the beginning. But I realized that firstly, after spending months working on it, we don't have equipment for like thermoforming these sort of takeaway packages or plates. So that really frustrated me. So then I started looking at the black liquor that came out from that. So from there, then that black liquor that I was getting, I was like, you know what, maybe let me focus on lignin, because I had seen so many applications of lignin and I knew a little bit about it. So in 2018, 2019, I then started doing home experiments around lignin extraction. And essentially there it's just all about using the black liquor, which in the pulp and paper industry now, they really burn it for energy. And seeing how best we can then extract value from that. So 2018, 2019, in the kitchen, trying to figure out the best way to really do this using green chemistry. And then from there, obviously, we progressed into using a lab in 2019. So in 2019, I started working at the lab at VETS, mainly focused on various methods for lignin extraction. But in that journey, what I then sort of started realizing is that there's so much that can be done with biomass. I mean, I sort of started understanding a little bit about things like hemicellulose, and I'll talk a bit more about the products themselves, but started realizing that there's hemicelluloses, and then figure out how can you then extract these. But obviously there's discoveries that come along with this. I mean, we made so many different discoveries in this process. I mean, one of which I really find interesting is like we were able to extract tartaric acid from this process, which is like being able to extract tartaric acid from lignocellulosic material hasn't been done before. I mean, it mostly comes from the wine industry or tamarind, and it was really fascinating. So that idea that there's so much that can be done with this biomass, I mean, it's just sort of led to other things. And the biosurfactants or the soap actually came through an interesting path, because we had created this sort of process that produces everything until this waste liquor. So it was like, it's just a waste liquor, we'll just throw it away. But after playing around with it a little bit, we just actually realized that it's actually a biosurfactant that we had created, which was also very interesting for us. And that's how then we then tapped into the soap production. And the bioplastics emerged after getting into lignin, because we were like, we have this material now, what do we do with this thing? And then we started playing with bioplastics and trying to make plastics using the lignin. So that's sort of how it progressed, because the idea here is to create like a biorefinery using this idea of total biomass valorization. So in simple terms, it just means that we literally trying to use every component of a plant to create high value or different types of material. So this idea of being able to do that is what sort of led to the other products being made. And to talk about the products themselves, so lignin is possibly the second most abundant organic polymer. I mean, it's a very complex structure. I mean, in terms of it contains like these three main phenolic groups, which are so interesting in that for every different source, you have a different arrangement of these phenolic structures, which makes it so complex to understand. And for me, I found it really interesting that this material, I mean, if you take it from wood versus from agricultural waste, the structure is different, but also the type of wood you're taking it from. If you take it from pine versus eucalyptus, the structure is different. It was so fascinating to me that this material is really complex, but when you really start looking into its sort of applications, I mean, it also became much more interesting for me. So in terms of lignin, the main thing that started drawing me towards it is the ability to use it in sort of like creating. For me, the fascination was crude oil. I was so fascinated with crude oil in the beginning that I realized that with lignin, it could be the key to crude oil production, bio crude oil production. So it's one of the things that obviously I can't share much on that, but we've been able to sort of create bio crude oil using lignin with a dual extraction of green hydrogen. I mean, I can't talk about how beautiful lignin is, but it's really a beautiful.
You're talking about lignin like I used to talk about chitosan, so I'm totally on board with you. It sounds like such an amazing product, so versatile, and just fascinating how many fundamental applications it can contribute to. It's amazing.
Yes, I mean, true, but because we realize also that most of the market doesn't understand what lignin is, what we then try to do is make it sort of a tangible thing and use it in normal everyday sort of application. So what we are doing now with lignin is using it as a natural UV filter. So if you think about it, I mean, sunscreen mostly using zinc oxide or titanium oxide, but now being able to use a natural material like lignin. I mean, lignin, the powder form, we ran it through UV absorbance. I mean, it blocks UVA, B, and C. And completely blocks these rays, which for us it was really fascinating to discover, because it's now it's
wow.
like
I didn't expect that to be part of its characteristics.
Yeah. I mean, it's the reason why we then thought, you know what? How do we then put this property into things like sunscreens and like different resins, polymers? So that's when we then sort of started trying to put them in sort of like everyday use. We've put that in shampoos. But also what's fascinating about lignin is that it contains these other active properties. So if we take lignin and use it in a sunscreen, it also forms, it has also like antibacterial and antioxidant properties.
Oh yeah.
Which is just amazing, So this is one of the reasons why, for me, lignin was so fascinating, because above and beyond it being used for either biocoal production, crude oil production, green hydrogen, vanillin, you could, also use it as animal feed, use it as a part of in surfactants, in binders. So for me, I just thought to myself, this is probably one of the most interesting biomaterial, organic polymers I've ever come across. So I've been fascinated with this, since 2018. And what we are doing with it now is just mainly focusing on, like I said, incorporation in cosmetics. And I'll talk a bit about the brand later on that we've developed especially for this.
Please.
But it's just using it in cosmetics and skincare, but also in resins and polymers. And that's what we are currently doing with the lignin at the moment. And some people are interested in purchasing it as well, mostly Sweden and in Germany. So we are also looking at exploring that. What's also interesting, actually, one company that we just recently talked to started using lignin as like a coating for paper, which makes it like a hydrophobic layer on top. So, for example...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, instead of using like the ethyl vinyl that people are currently using in the market, or like using polyvinyl acetate, you are able to then use this lignin coating as a replacement for like food packaging. It's just amazing.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's plant-based, so it's like more natural and just safer in general.
True.
Wow. So I just want to, because you've mentioned all of these uses for lignin, how is lignin produced? Is this a very easy process to extract the properties that you want from this lignin for the specific types of products, or what is the process? Is it like you said, you've actually worked in the kitchen, you've done household experiments, so it sounds quite easy to extract lignin. But just so that those who are not coming from a scientific background can understand a bit more about the production of lignin.
So it I wouldn't say it's easy, but we sort of have made it look easy to extract it. So so normally in a normal paper mill, what they do is the most used one is something called the Kraft process, where they use sodium hydroxide and sodium sulfide to cook the lignin at really high temperatures. What that does is sort of just to cleave out the lignin from the cell wall, but also put the hemicelluloses in the black liquor as well. because their focus is on the cellulose. So they try to remove as much lignin as possible from the cellulose fibers. So from that, you have something called black liquor. So this black liquor has always been considered sort of waste, and in that you have lignin that's dissolved in the black liquor. That dissolution process happens as a result of those high alkalinic conditions. I mean, they're working at north of 12, a pH of 12 in these sort of pulping reactors. So what we are doing is we sort of are simulating this pulping process with using less chemicals and relatively lower temperatures, and we sort of get the same thing. So we also get a black liquor, and we have a stream of cellulose that comes out. So from that black liquor is where the lignin, the hemicellulose resides, right? So what we are doing is essentially then protonating the black liquor. I mean, if you think about a pH of about 12, it has high hydroxides in there. So what we then do is protonate that. So we developed a proprietary process that protonates that black liquor for the lignin extraction, but has a dual way of then extracting tartaric acid from that process. So just to put it simply, we take the very high pH black liquor and reduce it down through protonation of those OH ions, and that process on its own then extracts the lignin from the black liquor. So you then have this brown powder material that sort of gets separated from the rest of the liquor. Yeah.
Yes. Is that usually a high yield, or how much do you usually get from one sample?
So the lignin yield is determined by a few things. So different plants have different lignin compositions and different amounts, right?
Yes.
So then the pulping process, depending on the residence time, depending on the pH, and depending also on the reagents, because there's different types of pulping. So there's solder pulping, there's the kraft pulping. So depending on the pulping process, you are then able to extract different amounts of lignin. So if you're running it for longer at a high pH using the kraft process, for example, you are able to then get a relatively higher yield as opposed to running at lower temperatures and just using sodium hydroxide, for example. And in the extraction process, there's also the precipitation of the lignin. There's also different variables that lead to the differences in the yield. But at the moment, we are getting about 20% yield from the original biomass of lignin. But in the black liquor, we do about a 90% extraction process. So the yield out of the black liquor is extremely high for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So we've mentioned bioplastics, and it's quite a popular word right now. There is incredible growth in research surrounding bioplastics. I don't know if you know, but in Colombia and Mexico, they're using avocado pit waste to actually make bioplastic plates and cutlery. And another company has actually utilized pineapple stalk waste to make plates that they can really plant back into the ground, and it will actually grow a plant again.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, what is the concept around bioplastics? Some people don't really understand what bioplastics really is, and the marketing industry kind of sometimes misconstrue the information surrounding bioplastics and give us a false information and idea of what it really is.
Yeah.
So if you can just explain to us a bit more about the actual benefits about having bioplastics in our environment and the recyclable and reusability of bioplastics. That would be great.
Okay. No, thank you for that question. So I think firstly we sort of need to understand what bioplastics sort of are, and it sort of so to make plastic. Firstly, you need carbon to do that, and this has historically come from fossil fuels. I mean, be it from coal through the gasification and the Fischer-Tropsch process, or through crude oil and ethylene extraction. So fundamentally, you need carbon to make plastic. Now, what happens then is if you need to make bioplastics, which means now you need a source that is biologically derived. But also it's very tricky with this because it causes a lot of confusion, because if you think about it, crude oil technically is biologically derived. So it causes so many trickiness in that regard.
Yes,
You know?
that's where the confusion gets in.
Yeah. But the way it's coined now is just bioplastics are plastics that are from a biological source, oftentimes, that are biodegradable at times. But what's also causing more confusion is that you have two types of bioplastics. You have the ones that are biodegradable, then you have ones that are not biodegradable, which means that they do not, the ones that do not biodegrade just don't, degrade under enzymatic conditions and that sort of stuff. But now you also have petroleum-based biodegradable bioplastics, which means that then they are biodegradable. So, for example, there's something called polyvinyl alcohol. It's a water-soluble, biodegradable plastic, but it's derived from fossil fuels, which, if you think about it, it could be considered a good thing because it's biodegradable, but the source is fossil fuels. Then you have bio-based bioplastics, and oftentimes these are, let's say, for example, made from starch, and they are made from sort of like biomass and bio-based sort of origin. So that sort of just gives a picture in terms of like bioplastics. So you have different types. You have non-biodegradable and biodegradable. Then you have bio-based and fossil-based. So all of this is just sort of like it causes a lot of confusion in the market. And that's why, like you said,
it's a lot of categorization.
Yes, and like you said, what happens a lot in this bioplastics industry is something called greenwashing. So what typically people do is they would sort of say that something is biodegradable, when in effect it technically isn't. But because you just see biodegradable, you just think, oh, this is a great plastic. So that's where the misconstruing of this idea comes from, especially from an industry perspective.
Nice.
But in terms of bioplastics, they are, if done well and done properly, could be the saving grace to the plastic problem. But I believe that at the moment, the way things are done, it doesn't allow for that system to work, because this has to be a whole ecosystem, I think. So for example, if you have bioplastics that are being produced in, let's say, Africa or wherever, you need to also have a sort of a loop that these plastics will travel through, these bioplastics will travel through, because if you do not have facilities that will take these, especially post-use,
that's true.
If you don't have at-source separation put in place, then you have them getting mixed with your PETs and your high-density polyethylenes, which becomes a bit of a problem as well. So I believe that bioplastics could be beneficial to the environment if certain things are done. If we are able to fully put systems in place for at-source separation, but also have composting facilities that will be able to channel all of that into those sort of facilities. That's how they can be beneficial. But at the moment, as it is, you have problems around greenwashing. People are making products using fossil-based plastics and calling them bio-based or calling them biodegradable when they're actually not biodegradable. You have people producing bioplastics but not having a pathway in which these will travel post-use, which then ends up getting mixed with your other plastics, which leads them to technically then not being recycled or biodegraded. But also you have the plastics industry that is putting a lot of money in causing the confusion in the bioplastics industry. So you find that the plastics industry is actually the ones pushing propaganda to confuse the people around this sort of marketing, which is so interesting.
Yeah. Now that's a wonderful answer, and it really shines some light on many aspects of what you just said about bioplastics. Thank you so much for that clarification. So your company actually focuses, clearly you are very orientated to sustainability, which I find absolutely fantastic. And you have a very clear view of what you want for the future of your company. And you also plan your materials and your experiments and everything around that. So from where you source your materials to how you produce your products, how do you actually bring the sustainable environment into your company? How do you propagate that and keep that going? And what are the challenges that you face during a day-to-day process working at your company, and how do you overcome that?
No, thank you very much for that question. For us, what we are actually doing is trying to reimagine sustainability. Oftentimes when people think about sustainability, they either think about recycling or reducing the CO2 emissions. I mean, we look at it a bit differently. So even from the source of the biomass, we do not cut any trees. So we use waste plant materials. So we use like your sawdust, agricultural waste.
That's wonderful.
So even from there, that's what we ensure that we are not part of like deforestation. So that is a very important part for us. The processing, the process itself is so beautiful. I mean, we've created this total biomass valorization process that not only is sort of zero waste, but the whole process is so integrated in such a way that we have even like a very reduced emissions in our process. But also the emissions themselves, if you think about CO2, it always circles back because of the sort of biomass that we use. So the process itself, from the beginning, we are able to rip apart the whole plant, get the same cellulose. So the cellulose, we use it for glucose and nanocellulose production. We then take the lignin and put it through a different process that allows us to be able to use it for UV filters and that sort of thing. And we then take the hemicelluloses, which are just wood sugars that we then use to make furfural, HMF, and acetic acid. But at the end, we have this biosurfactant. So the whole process in itself, it produces only products and zero waste, literally. We have different recycling streams that ensure that the recycling of the water, we try to ensure that water is recycled within the process. And the energy consumption in the process also, we are working to try and find best ways to integrate the heat within the process so that we are able to reduce the consumption. At the moment also, because we've created something called the biocoal, which has about 30 megajoules per kg heat capacity, which is crazy. We are then now looking at using that biocoal in the process for energy generation so that we have an internal energy generation system. Like I said, the process itself is zero waste. We're producing natural products, and also we're looking at internal energy generation. As far as sustainability goes, you can't get more sustainable than that.
No, that's amazing. No, that's really good. I'm really impressed by it.
And some of the challenges we face, honestly, is especially with scaling up. So if you're doing something on a lab scale, it oftentimes works really nice, it's perfect, it's good, but if you increase that factor by at least, let's say 50 liters, if you go from like 5 liters to 50 liters, the dynamics change a little bit. And because now the journey that we are on is sort of trying to build the biorefinery step by step, the challenges are mostly around the upscaling process. We come across so many different challenges, especially around the material processing. Something as simple as mixing becomes a different thing when you start, upscaling.
True.
So what we've started, so what we are doing is sort of trying to not grow quickly, because at the moment, we produce about 5 to 10 kgs of lignin, but if we wanted, we could go to 500 kgs just easily. But we're trying to take it slowly because we understand these scalability problems, and for us that's been the biggest challenge, but also getting in our context in South Africa, getting people to understand the product that we make, because firstly most of the products I mentioned are either still in R&D of these big companies or are done in the EU mostly. So getting people to understand what it is that we're doing is so complex, because it makes it difficult not only to share the vision, but also to be able to share the products with either other companies to try and test them out, because most of these things are not very well known. And I think from a sustainability standpoint, it also is a challenge, because you want the companies to move to use natural UV filters. They don't know what thing you are bringing to them. Then it's a whole thing that happens there around awareness. But we're slowly getting there, and we are trying to work with like the government institutions now to position ourselves in such a way that we become thought leaders in this space, and we become the sort of go-to people when it comes to environmental sustainability and this biorefinery concept. So that's how we're trying to get over that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, awareness is key, I think, because people sometimes when you're used to doing something for so long, it feels like terrible effort to change. But if you're changing and you're using a product that has like multiple uses and no waste and it's cheaper, it's plant-based, it's safer, there's so many advantages that come around with that change, you know. So it's sometimes just that little budge, that little nudge that someone needs, just because you're scared of something that you don't know about or you don't understand. So just that awareness will definitely start bringing in that change for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
So you've mentioned now that you actually work with other companies and that you provide a consultation service, correct?
Yes.
So which type of clients do you approach, or which clients approach you, and how do you how can they actually get connected with you and start receiving consultation from your company?
So with the consultations, I mean, what we realize is that because we're dealing with things that are not really familiar, products that are not familiar in the market, we needed to find a way in which people can use them more. And we thought there's two ways in which we're going about this. Consultation, wherein we help people incorporate our products into their products. I mean, that's mainly what the consultations are all about. But then we've also then sort of taken another stream where we are making different products with our products, for example, cosmetic products, so that we can then show the market that this is how this is used. But to go back to consultation, what we do essentially is, for example, if you are a hair care company and you are interested in becoming more natural or more sustainable, we would then sort of help reformulate what you have. So if you have, let's say, a shampoo, we would then help you reformulate the shampoo, either using our lignin or the biosurfactant that we have, and including that to replace, let's say, if you're using SLES in your process, in your formulation, then we'll help you then remove that and add our biosurfactant.
I see.
So yeah, I mean, we actually we are working with like a kids salon, and they are making shampoo and a hair detangler, and they're making hair butters and conditioners. So what we are doing is then taking the lignin and incorporating it in those products so that we can add some of these properties that I talked about earlier. So this is sort of how we do it. And in like the resins industry, we are looking at partners. Recently spoke to a few that are interested in the UV filtration properties of lignin. And now we just work with them to say, this is how it works, this is how you can incorporate it in your product. So we can sort of come up with this co-creation process that allows us to use the lignin in their product, but also for them to have a better sustainability approach to their product. So that's sort of how we sort of use this, how we do the consultations, yeah.
That's wonderful. And then just my final question is, you are actually launching another product or another type of, it's a skincare range, a plant-based skincare range. I think the company's name, I might be butchering it as well, it's called Ophil, right?
Yes.
So you are, can you tell me a bit more about these products that you are bringing in? And I've seen some of it now, and it seems to be free of any harsh, unnatural chemicals. It's much more plant-based, orientated. Please tell me a bit more about that. And when is that going to be available?
Yes, so Ophil, I mean, Ophil, it's the O is from organic and the Phil is from the chlorophyll. So this is the brand that we created because we wanted to tap into the skincare and cosmetics market, but looking at more 100% natural products. So what we are doing with that brand, it's sort of then taking the biosurfactant and using that to create different products. So what we are doing at the moment is we have created a hand wash. We've created even a sanitizer. We've created micellar water. We've created a makeup brush cleanser, which this market also is very interesting because I don't use makeup. So when I discovered that there's a huge problem with like washing your makeup brushes, because if you think about it, if you leave the brushes for long, the bacteria, the clog up of the makeup. I didn't know it
Yes.
was a big problem. So we then created a makeup brush cleanser that strips off all of the oils from the brush and conditions the brush and leaves a beautiful scent as well on the brush. But in a
Oh, that's
nutshell,
wonderful.
yeah, I mean, it's actually really interesting. In a nutshell, Allfill is a brand that uses the biosurfactant we create, but also some of the lignin. So with the lignin, for example, we'll be making a natural, 100% biodegradable makeup foundation, like these powder foundation. We will be using that to the lignin to make that, just some of the products we're doing. But here is just looking at skincare and cosmetics and trying to really change the face of cosmetics using 100% natural, very sensitive products to be able to create this. And our website is live for Allfill. And what we are doing now is preparing for the launch. So this launch should be next month in Feb, where we'll be launching our makeup brush cleanser and our hand wash. And then we'll slowly be rolling out different products like the micellar water, the makeup foundations, and different products using that. But we just...
Oh, that's exciting.
yes, I mean, it's really nice. Yeah.
There isn't a lot of makeup products available that are completely clean, so that's going to be very exciting to see. And I've actually checked out your website, and the prices look very reasonable. I'll link the website in the show notes as well for people to check out.
Yeah.
But yes, that sounds great.
No, thanks. Yeah, I mean, what we realized also when we were doing the market analysis is that the currently available natural products, they're really expensive. And if you try to get people to be more sustainable, I mean, you need to make the products accessible. If you're now pricing them too high, you're just making them inaccessible to a lot of people, and
That's true.
it becomes difficult to drive the change towards being more eco-friendly and environmentally conscious. So we then sort of try to reduce the unit cost of these products so much that we are able to price it just below the market pricing.
Yes, and that's excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I will definitely link all of the links for the company and for the website in the show notes for people to check out, so please make sure you do. I think the people have listened and learned a lot from you today.
No, thank you very much, Alicia, for having me, and I truly appreciate the time you've given us to share about the company.